There's something strangely hypnotic about the first few seconds of the trailer for Wednesday, and I don't mean that in the usual, "oh, this looks cool" kind of way. I mean it in that quiet, creeping sense where you realize, almost a little too late, that the tone isn't trying to impress you. It's trying to unsettle you. And it does that by doing something most modern Hollywood trailers are almost afraid to do. It slows down. You see Wednesday Addams standing there, completely still, emotion locked behind those unblinking eyes, and the camera doesn't rush her. It lingers. That's the first clue. This isn't going to be chaos-driven storytelling. It's going to be character-driven, mood-heavy, almost gothic in how it breathes. And then, without warning, that dry, razor-sharp voice cuts through the silence, delivered by Jenna Ortega in a way that doesn't feel like she's performing the character. It feels like she is the character. That distinction matters more than people realize, because Wednesday, as a character, has always existed in this exaggerated, almost theatrical space. But here, she feels grounded, dangerous even. Not physically threatening in a traditional sense, but psychologically, emotionally, like someone who sees through everything and everyone. The trailer wastes no time dropping you into the premise: a new school, Nevermore Academy, and instantly, the visual language shifts. Gone is the dull, gray monotony of the normal world. Instead, you're surrounded by towering Gothic architecture, fog that rolls in like it has intentions, and a color palette that leans heavily into deep blues, blacks, and muted purples. It's not just aesthetic, it's identity. There's a moment, and it's subtle, where the camera pans across the student body, and you start noticing something isn't quite right. These aren't typical high school archetypes. They're off, slightly unnatural, and the trailer doesn't spell it out immediately, which is smart. It trusts the audience to feel it before it explains it. That's a very Tim Burton style approach, by the way. He's always been more interested in atmosphere than exposition. And speaking of Burton, his fingerprints are all over this thing. Not in a loud, over-the-top way, but in the details. The way shadows are used, the way certain characters are framed slightly off-center, creating this constant sense of unease. Even the humor, it's not punchline-driven, it's situational, it's dry, it sneaks up on you. There's a sequence in the trailer, blink and you might miss it, where Wednesday casually unleashes a swarm of piranhas into a pool. And what's fascinating isn't the act itself, it's her expression, or lack of one. There's no satisfaction, no anger, just purpose. That tells you everything about how this version of the character operates. She doesn't react emotionally the way most protagonists do. She processes differently. As the trailer unfolds, it starts layering in the mystery. Glimpses of something lurking in the woods, quick flashes of chaos, a monster maybe, or something worse. And suddenly, what you thought was just going to be a character study starts revealing itself as something deeper. There's a narrative engine here, a murder mystery possibly, something that requires unraveling. And that's where the trailer really hooks you, because it doesn't give you answers, it gives you questions. Why is Wednesday here, really? What is she running from, or running toward? And more importantly, why does it feel like she belongs in this world more than anywhere else she's ever been? There's also this interesting dynamic introduced between Wednesday and her parents, particularly Morticia Addams, played with this haunting elegance by Catherine Zeta-Jones. The trailer hints at tension there, not the loud, explosive kind, but something quieter, generational. Almost like Wednesday is trying to carve out her own identity, separate from the legacy of the Addams name. And then there's the editing rhythm. It starts slow, almost meditative, but as it progresses, it tightens. Cuts become quicker. Music builds, not in a bombastic way, but in this creeping, escalating tension. By the final moments, you're not just watching a trailer, you're feeling pulled into a world that doesn't operate by normal rules. One of the smartest choices here is how restrained everything feels. In an era where trailers tend to over-explain, over-show, and over-promise, this one holds back. It trusts that the character of Wednesday is compelling enough to carry intrigue on her own. And honestly, that confidence pays off. Because by the time the trailer ends, you're not thinking about special effects or big action sequences. You're thinking about her, about what's going on inside that mind, about the mystery that seems to follow her like a shadow she can't quite shake. And maybe that's the most interesting thing about this entire setup. It positions Wednesday not just as a participant in the story, but as the center of it, the lens through which everything else is filtered. Which means the success of the show doesn't rely on spectacle. It relies on character, on tone, on whether or not you believe in this version of Wednesday Addams as a fully realized, living presence. And based on what the trailer shows, it's not just believable, it's unsettlingly real. And that feeling, that something about her isn't just different, but deliberately distant, that's exactly where the story quietly begins to unfold, not with a loud, inciting incident, but with a kind of emotional detachment that almost feels like armor. You find yourself stepping into Wednesday's world not through chaos, but through consequence. She's already done something that crosses a line most people wouldn't even approach, and the fallout from that action is what pushes her into Nevermore Academy. It's not framed like punishment in the traditional sense, it's more like relocation. As if the world she came from simply decided, "You don't belong here," and sent her somewhere that might actually make sense. What's fascinating is how she reacts to that shift. There's no visible resistance, no teenage rebellion in the way you'd expect. She doesn't slam doors or argue loudly. Instead, she observes, constantly. It's like she's collecting data on everyone around her, quietly building psychological profiles without anyone realizing it. And Nevermore itself, it's not just a school, it's almost like a pressure chamber for identity. Every student there is, in some way, an outsider. But unlike typical stories where that leads to camaraderie, here it creates layers of tension. Because being different doesn't automatically make people allies. It just means they're all navigating their own versions of isolation. Wednesday moves through this environment like someone who's not looking for connection, but for clarity. There's a difference. She's not trying to make friends. She's trying to understand how this place works. And more importantly, how she fits into something that already feels strangely familiar. There's a subtle thread running underneath all of this, something unresolved. It's not immediately explained, but you can feel it in the way she reacts to certain moments. Small flashes of something deeper. Not emotion in the conventional sense, but recognition. Like she's brushing up against something she's meant to uncover. And then the incidents start. At first, they're almost easy to dismiss. Strange occurrences, whispers of something happening beyond the boundaries of the school. But the tone shifts quickly once it becomes clear that these aren't isolated events. There's a pattern forming, and Wednesday is one of the first to notice it. What makes her approach so compelling is that she doesn't panic. She doesn't jump to conclusions. She treats it like a puzzle. Every clue, every inconsistency, it all gets processed with this cold precision that feels more analytical than emotional. And in a strange way, that makes her the most reliable perspective in the story. Because while everyone else reacts, she calculates. There's a moment where she starts connecting pieces that others either ignore or fail to see. And it's not presented with dramatic music or flashy editing. It's quiet, internal. You can almost feel the gears turning in her mind as she starts realizing that whatever is happening here, it's not random. And that realization changes everything. Because now, she's not just a student adjusting to a new environment. She's someone actively investigating it. And the deeper she goes, the more the world around her starts to reveal cracks beneath its surface. Relationships begin to form, not in the traditional sense, but in this uneasy, almost reluctant way. People are drawn to her, even when they don't fully understand why. There's something about her presence that disrupts the normal social dynamics of the school. She doesn't follow the unspoken rules, and that makes others question them. One particular dynamic stands out early on, someone who represents almost the complete opposite of Wednesday. Brighter, more expressive, emotionally open. And instead of clashing in a predictable way, their interactions create this strange balance. It's not friendship, at least not immediately. It's more like friction that slowly starts to shape both sides. At the same time, the mystery continues to expand. What initially felt like something external something lurking outside the school, starts to feel closer, more personal. There are hints that whatever is happening might be connected to the history of Nevermore itself, and possibly to Wednesday in ways she hasn't fully realized yet. And that's where the story starts pulling you in deeper, because it's no longer just about solving a mystery. It's about uncovering identity, about understanding whether Wednesday is simply observing the darkness around her, or if she's somehow part of it. There's a quiet tension in that idea, because for the first time, you start to question her objectivity. Not in a way that makes her unreliable, but in a way that makes her involvement feel inevitable. As she digs further, authority figures begin to notice. Not necessarily because she's causing trouble, but because she's asking the kind of questions that make people uncomfortable. And the responses she gets aren't always answers. Sometimes they're deflections, sometimes they're warnings, which only pushes her further. Because if there's one thing the story establishes early on, it's this. Wednesday doesn't back away from discomfort. She moves toward it, almost instinctively. And the deeper she goes, the more the tone of the story shifts from curiosity to something darker, something with weight. The kind of narrative where every new discovery doesn't just answer a question, it creates two more. By the time you reach this point, you're no longer watching a girl adjust to a new school. You're watching someone unravel a system that was never meant to be fully understood. And the unsettling part? She seems completely at home doing it. And the more she settles into that role, the observer turning into an active participant, the more the world around her starts to push back in ways that aren't always obvious at first, but they linger. There's this gradual tightening of space, almost like the walls of Nevermore are closing in without physically moving. People start watching her differently. Conversations shift when she enters a room. It's subtle, but it builds. You begin to realize that Wednesday isn't the only one paying attention. Others have started to notice her patterns, her questions, her persistence. And yet, she doesn't slow down. If anything, she becomes more precise, more focused. She starts revisiting moments that didn't seem important before, reanalyzing interactions, reinterpreting what people said versus what they meant. It's like she's peeling back layers of a story that's been deliberately buried under years of silence and half-truths. What really stands out here is how the narrative allows her intelligence to breathe. It doesn't rush her deductions. It doesn't hand her easy answers. Instead, it gives her space to be wrong sometimes, or at least incomplete. And that's where the tension comes from. Not just in what she knows, but in what she thinks she knows. Because as the mystery deepens, it becomes clear that there are forces at play that operate beyond simple logic. There are moments, brief, almost disorienting, where reality itself seems to bend slightly. Visions, perhaps, or fragments of something tied to her past. And these aren't treated like typical supernatural gimmicks. They feel intrusive, uninvited, like glimpses into something she doesn't fully control. And that lack of control, that's new for her. Up until this point, Wednesday has been defined by her composure, her ability to remain unaffected. But now, there's a variable she can't quite account for. Something internal. Something that connects her to the very mystery she's trying to solve. And you can sense the shift in how she processes things. Not outwardly, she's still composed, still sharp, but internally, there's a recalibration happening. She's no longer just analyzing the world around her. She's starting to question her place within it. Meanwhile, the stakes begin to rise. What started as isolated incidents now carries real consequences. There are victims, real danger, and suddenly the tone edges closer to something more urgent. Not frantic, but heavier. More grounded in the idea that this isn't just a puzzle to be solved. It's something that could spiral out of control if left unchecked. And even then, Wednesday doesn't panic. She adapts. She starts forming strategies, testing theories, pushing boundaries in ways that blur the line between curiosity and risk. There are moments where you almost catch yourself wondering if she's going too far. And then you realize that, for her, too far doesn't really exist in the same way it does for everyone else. Relationships continue to evolve in the background, but they never overshadow the central thread. Instead, they complicate it. Because the more she interacts with others, the more variables are introduced into her investigation. Trust becomes a factor. Doubt creeps in. And for someone who relies so heavily on control and logic, those elements are disruptive. There's a particularly interesting dynamic that develops with authority figures, people who hold pieces of the truth but aren't willing to hand them over easily. And the way Wednesday navigates those interactions, it's almost like watching a chess game. Every word is measured, every response calculated. But even in those moments, you can feel the tension building beneath the surface. Because the closer she gets to the truth, the more resistance she encounters. Not always directly. Sometimes it's just a shift in tone, a hesitation, a door that doesn't open as easily as it should. And that resistance tells you something important. There's more to this story than anyone is admitting. By now, the mystery isn't just about what's happening in the present. It's about what happened before Wednesday ever arrived. The history of Nevermore starts to feel less like background and more like a foundation. Something that everything else is built on, including the secrets people are trying to keep hidden. And Wednesday, whether intentionally or not, is digging straight into it. There's a moment, quiet, almost reflective, where it becomes clear that this isn't just about solving a case for her. It's about understanding something deeper, something tied to identity, to legacy, maybe even to destiny, in a way she wouldn't normally entertain. But the story doesn't spell that out. It lets you sit with it. It lets the implications settle slowly, the way real realizations do. And as everything starts to converge, the clues, the relationships, the unanswered questions, you get this growing sense that something is approaching. Not a single event, but a turning point. The kind where everything that's been building finally collides. And the unsettling part is, Wednesday doesn't seem afraid of that moment. If anything, she's been moving toward it the entire time. There's a point where that slow, deliberate build finally starts to tip. Not into chaos exactly, but into something sharper, more defined. Like all those scattered pieces she's been collecting suddenly begin aligning in a way that feels almost too precise to be coincidence. And you can sense it in her body language before anything is confirmed. She becomes even quieter. Not withdrawn, but focused in a way that suggests she's reached a threshold. The kind where instinct and logic start overlapping, where she's no longer just following clues, she's anticipating outcomes. What's interesting is how the world around her reacts to that shift, because while she's becoming more certain, everyone else is becoming more uncertain. Doubt spreads, not just about the situation, but about her. There's this underlying question that starts to take shape. Is she solving the mystery? Or is she somehow entangled in it in a way no one fully understands? And the story leans into that ambiguity without rushing to clarify it. There are moments where her conclusions seem airtight, almost undeniable, and then something small doesn't fit, a detail that disrupts the pattern just enough to create hesitation. And instead of ignoring it, she lingers on it. That's what separates her from everyone else. She doesn't protect her own theories, she challenges them. But even that has its limits, because as the pressure builds, as the consequences of being wrong become more real, there's a subtle shift in how she approaches risk. Not recklessness, but urgency. The kind that comes from realizing that waiting for perfect certainty might mean losing the chance to act altogether. And that's where the narrative starts to tighten in a way that feels almost suffocating. The mystery, which once felt expansive, starts narrowing. Suspects, motives, hidden connections, they begin to converge. And with that convergence comes confrontation. Not always physical, but psychological. Conversations that carry weight. Exchanges where what isn't said matters more than what is. There's a sequence, quiet but loaded, where Wednesday finds herself face to face with someone who might hold the key to everything. And the tension in that moment doesn't come from raised voices or dramatic music. It comes from restraint, from the careful choice of words, from the realization that one wrong assumption could unravel everything she's built. And yet, she doesn't hesitate. Because by now, she's accepted something fundamental, that truth isn't clean. It doesn't arrive fully formed. It has to be pulled apart, examined, sometimes even forced into the light. At the same time, the external threat, the thing that's been looming in the background, starts to feel more immediate, less abstract. There are clearer glimpses now, clearer signs that whatever is happening isn't going to stay contained. And that raises the stakes in a way that shifts the entire tone. This isn't just about understanding anymore, it's about stopping something. And even then, Wednesday approaches it with that same measured intensity. She doesn't suddenly transform into a traditional hero. She doesn't deliver emotional speeches or rally people around her. She stays herself, focused, detached, at least on the surface. But there's a difference now. You start to see glimpses of something underneath. Not vulnerability in the obvious sense, but awareness. An understanding that her actions affect more than just the outcome of the mystery. They affect people, real people, with their own fears, their own stakes in what's happening. And that awareness complicates things, because it introduces a variable she can't fully control. There are moments where you can almost feel her recalculating in real time, adjusting not just for logic, but for impact. And that's new territory for her. It doesn't make her softer, it makes her more precise in a different way, more aware of consequences beyond the immediate goal. As everything builds toward that inevitable collision, the pacing reflects it. Scenes become tighter, transitions sharper. There's less space to breathe, but it doesn't feel rushed. It feels intentional, like the story is guiding you towards something it's been quietly preparing all along. And when pieces start falling into place, real pieces, the kind that shift the entire understanding of what's been happening, it doesn't feel like a twist for the sake of surprise. It feels earned, like the clues were always there, waiting to be seen from the right angle. What's compelling is how Wednesday processes those revelations. There's no dramatic breakdown, no visible shock, just stillness. A moment where everything clicks into place behind her eyes. And in that stillness, you realize she's already moved past the reaction phase. She's thinking about what comes next. Because for her, understanding the truth isn't the end goal. It's the beginning of the final move. And that's when the tension starts to peak. Not in the way a traditional thriller would, with chase sequences or explosions, but in this careful, almost surgical unraveling of events. Every decision she's made, every observation she's recorded, starts feeding into a single trajectory, a pathway that inevitably leads to confrontation. And yet, you can feel the restraint. She never rushes. Wednesday doesn't panic. She doesn't react. She anticipates. The supporting characters, in contrast, are increasingly frantic. Their reactions provide this fascinating counterpoint to Wednesday's composure. Where she sees patterns, they see chaos. Where she calculates consequences, they flail against immediate threats. And the interplay between those two modes of perception creates a tension that's almost unbearable, in a way that feels intimate rather than cinematic in the loud sense. The fear isn't just external, it's psychological. It's watching people react when you know the truth, or at least a piece of it, and realizing their panic might undermine everything. In a scene that's visually stunning yet understated, Wednesday confronts a character who has been manipulating events from behind the scenes. The framing is tight. The camera doesn't give away the entire room at once, which forces you to focus on the subtle cues. A hand twitch, a shadow across a face, the tiniest flinch in posture. These are the details she notices. These are the moments where the power dynamics shift. And it's almost a silent battle, less about overt action, more about understanding who holds the advantage through intellect, observation, and timing. The story continues to layer these psychological maneuvers with small glimpses of the supernatural. Not over the top, not cartoonish, but just enough to unsettle and expand the sense that Nevermore Academy is alive in its own way. Shadows seem to move differently around Wednesday. Halls she's walked through 100 times suddenly feel unfamiliar. It's a brilliant way the narrative reminds us that the environment itself is a character, a living, reactive presence that influences her decisions without ever saying a word. By the midpoint of the story, the stakes are tangible. Threats are no longer abstract. Someone is hurt, lines are crossed, and the consequences of previous inactions are becoming painfully real. And yet, Wednesday's approach remains analytical. She assesses damage, anticipates reactions, and weighs options with this cold precision that both fascinates and unnerves everyone around her. The tension arises not from frantic action, but from the quiet certainty that she's always one step ahead, and the uncertainty of whether that will be enough. The trailer hinted at it, and by this stage in the story, it becomes unavoidable. The deeper Wednesday digs, the more intertwined she becomes with the mystery. This isn't just a narrative about solving a problem, it's a narrative about becoming inseparable from it. Her identity and the unfolding events are inextricably linked. The choices she makes will not only resolve the immediate conflict, but also redefine her understanding of who she is and what her role in this strange, Gothic world should be. Tension and pacing are masterfully handled through these layered sequences. The audience feels the pressure building without the need for bombastic cues. Music and silence interplay to create a breathing rhythm, and you start to notice how even the smallest sound, a creaking floorboard, a distant murmur, becomes amplified in the context of Wednesday's acute perception. Every frame feels purposeful. Every pause in dialogue holds significance. It's storytelling that trusts the audience to engage mentally rather than simply react emotionally. And it's not just about suspense. Relationships are being tested and reshaped in subtle ways. Characters who initially seemed adversarial or neutral begin showing cracks in their facades, revealing motivations and secrets that were never overtly stated. Wednesday's interactions with them aren't dramatic confrontations, they're micro-exchanges, loaded with implication and psychological weight. She often speaks in measured tones, allowing the other person's reactions to carry the emotional impact while maintaining her composure. As these layers unfold, the story begins to ask bigger questions. It's no longer simply a mystery about events at the school. It's about identity, legacy, and morality. How far should someone go to uncover the truth? What compromises are acceptable when the stakes are high? And perhaps most compellingly, how does a person like Wednesday, so detached, so observant, relate to others who are fundamentally driven by emotion? These thematic undercurrents provide depth, ensuring that the series resonates beyond its immediate Gothic setting and mysterious plot. By now, you begin to appreciate the brilliance in restraint. Unlike many modern series where tension is constantly ramped through spectacle, here it's cultivated patiently. Every reaction, every decision, every environmental cue is calculated to immerse the audience deeper into Wednesday's perspective. You are not just witnessing events unfold, you are inhabiting the thought process of a character whose intellect and psychological insight define the rhythm of the narrative. And yet, the series continues to layer in small, unexpected moments of humor, irony, and human interaction. Not to undercut the tension, but to humanize the characters, including Wednesday herself. She might respond to absurdity with a dry, biting remark, or display a fleeting expression that hints at something beneath her stoic exterior. These moments are brief but vital. They provide emotional texture and remind the audience that even in this meticulously controlled world, unpredictability exists, especially through human behavior. Toward the later portions of the narrative covered in this segment, you start seeing the story prepare for its climactic shifts. The groundwork laid through careful observation, small interactions, and incremental discoveries all converges into a sense of inevitable confrontation. You can sense it building like an electric charge in the air, the calm before the storm. But a storm defined not by action alone, but by consequence, intellect, and moral complexity. And it's at this point that the trailer's promise comes fully into focus. All those small, eerie details, the lingering shots of the Academy, the unflinching gaze of Wednesday, the hints of danger lurking just out of sight, coalesce into a narrative that feels meticulously planned. It's not just suspense for spectacle's sake. It's suspense as a reflection of character, intelligence, and environment. By the end of this first chapter of exploration, you realize something subtle but profound. The story doesn't just revolve around events, it revolves around perception, Wednesday's perception. And by aligning the audience so closely with her, the series transforms the mystery from something external into something intimate and immersive. The trailer captured that essence, but the unfolding story makes it palpable. The brilliance lies in the restraint, the pacing, and the precision of focus, choosing to linger on moments of observation rather than reaction, to develop tension through intellect rather than fear, to explore relationships and consequences instead of relying solely on plot mechanics. In doing so, it establishes a world and a character that demand attention, respect, and engagement. By the time the trailer, and by extension the narrative groundwork, comes to a close, you're left not with a series of questions about what happens next, but with a lingering impression of a world intricately designed and a protagonist whose mind is as compelling as any external threat she faces. The story has subtly, but effectively, positioned her as the axis upon which every plot, interaction, and revelation will turn. This, then, is what sets the tone for everything that follows. A measured, psychologically rich narrative where every detail matters, every silence has weight, and every observation propels the story forward. And as the audience, you're drawn in, not by spectacle, but by the magnetic, unsettling intelligence of Wednesday herself. From the very first frame, you get a sense that this isn't a conventional story. Wednesday moves through her environment with a precision that almost feels predatory, not in a violent sense, but in the way she observes, calculates, and anticipates. Every glance, every gesture, every measured word seems designed to test the world around her, to see where it bends, where it breaks, where she might find leverage. And the world responds. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, but increasingly, the subtle shifts in behavior become impossible to ignore. It's fascinating to watch the social dynamics at Nevermore Academy evolve under her influence. Characters who initially appeared confident, perhaps even untouchable, begin to reveal cracks when confronted with Wednesday's piercing insight. These interactions are never overtly confrontational. Rather, they are delicate dances of power, perception, and subtle intimidation. It's the kind of storytelling that rewards attention to micro-expressions, tone, and timing. A challenge, but one that makes the audience feel like an active participant in unraveling the narrative. The trailer hinted at the darker elements, the supernatural undertones, the Gothic ambiance. But in the unfolding story, those elements are treated with restraint, making them more effective. Shadows in hallways, strange noises, fleeting glimpses of creatures or unnatural events. These aren't cheap scares, they're atmospheric. They serve the dual purpose of heightening tension while reinforcing the sense that Nevermore Academy is not merely a setting, but a living, reactive character in its own right. And yet, despite these external pressures, Wednesday herself remains remarkably constant. Her composure isn't merely stoicism, it's strategy. She understands that panic, fear, or rash action are liabilities. By maintaining her distance, she gains the ability to see what others miss, to connect dots before they fully form, and to operate in spaces where others can't. The audience begins to realize that this isn't a protagonist who is being shaped by the story. The story is being shaped by her presence. This dynamic is most apparent in her interactions with the faculty and authority figures of Nevermore. Individuals who hold institutional power and knowledge attempt to assert dominance, to redirect her curiosity, or to mask truths. But Wednesday navigates these exchanges with surgical precision, extracting information without appearing overtly confrontational. The result is a constant, quiet tension. The viewer knows she's always calculating, always observing, and that her apparent calm masks a highly adaptive, highly analytical mind. Relationships among students also take on a layered complexity. There's the inevitable social friction of a new environment, of course, but the story treats these interactions with nuance. Alliances form, dissolve, and reconfigure based on observation and strategy, rather than purely emotional impulses. Wednesday's presence acts as a catalyst, amplifying latent tensions and revealing hidden motives. The interactions feel organic and consequential because they are filtered through the lens of a character who perceives more than anyone else realizes. And yet, in the midst of all this psychological maneuvering, there are moments of subtle humanization. A carefully timed expression, a fleeting glance, a line delivered with a hint of irony. All serve to remind the audience that beneath her calculated exterior, Wednesday is still navigating adolescence, identity, and morality. These touches prevent the character from becoming a purely cerebral entity. Instead, she is grounded, relatable, and compelling, even as she remains enigmatic. As the narrative progresses, the stakes escalate in a manner that feels organic rather than forced. Incidents that were once isolated, small disturbances, unusual occurrences, whispered warnings, begin to reveal interconnections. The implications extend beyond individual characters, hinting at a broader, more systemic conflict embedded in the Academy itself. And Wednesday, as always, approaches these developments with the same calculated detachment, assessing potential outcomes, weighing risk, and positioning herself for maximum advantage. The beauty of the storytelling lies in its layering. Tension builds through observation, deduction, and interpersonal dynamics rather than conventional spectacle. Each revelation carries weight because the groundwork has been meticulously laid. Clues, subtle visual cues, and minor behavioral inconsistencies accumulate, providing the audience with a sense of discovery that mirrors Wednesday's own analytical process. There are sequences where her intellect directly drives the plot forward. She identifies patterns, anticipates reactions, and implements strategies that shift the balance of power within the narrative. And the narrative rewards this precision. The audience sees tangible consequences emerge directly from her choices. These sequences are crafted to feel inevitable in hindsight, as though her deductions and interventions were always the natural course of events, even if they were unpredictable in the moment. The series also excels in pacing. Moments of intense observation and psychological maneuvering are punctuated by pauses, moments of reflection, quiet tension, or subtle revelation. These beats prevent fatigue, allowing the audience to absorb the complexity of the character dynamics and the unfolding mystery. Silence and stillness are weaponized in the same way that action might be in other stories. They create anticipation, heighten focus, and deepen engagement. As the story moves toward the later segments of the trailer's promise, the convergence of narrative threads becomes apparent. Small discoveries compound into larger revelations. Interpersonal dynamics reach a tipping point, and the subtle patterns Wednesday has been tracking begin to coalesce into a tangible threat or truth. And through all of this, her composure remains a constant anchor, guiding the audience's perception and providing a lens through which the complexity of Nevermore Academy is filtered. By this stage, the story has established several foundational truths: that Wednesday is both observer and actor, that the environment itself is an active participant, and that every interaction carries potential consequence. The audience begins to recognize the stakes are not just personal or local, they are systemic, affecting the balance of relationships, power structures, and perhaps the underlying mysteries of the Academy itself. And what's most compelling is that the narrative achieves this without ever sacrificing subtlety. Supernatural elements, interpersonal tension, psychological insight, they are all woven seamlessly together. The result is a story that feels layered, immersive, and intellectually satisfying, while still maintaining an emotional core anchored in Wednesday's perspective. By the conclusion of this chapter, the audience is not left with simple questions of what happens next, but with a deeper sense of anticipation. The groundwork has been laid for character development, escalating tension, and intricate plotting that promises to unfold in ways that are both surprising and inevitable. Wednesday's world is now fully realized, a Gothic, psychologically rich setting inhabited by a protagonist whose intelligence, composure, and subtlety make her presence both mesmerizing and unnerving. From the very beginning, there's a sense that Wednesday's story is as much about her internal world as it is about the events unfolding around her. The narrative carefully balances external action with the internal logic of her mind, and that duality is what gives the story such compelling depth. You watch her operate in a world full of unpredictable elements, yet she imposes her own structure on it, not through force, but through observation, deduction, and psychological acuity. Even early on, minor details take on oversized significance. A glance across a crowded hall, a fleeting reaction from a peer, the angle of light in a hallway. These are not background aesthetics. They're vital information to Wednesday. The audience begins to adopt her perspective almost involuntarily, noticing things that others overlook, and in doing so, becomes deeply immersed in her cognitive process. The storytelling is designed to reward attentiveness, and it's remarkably effective. This approach extends to her interactions with faculty. Authority figures try to maintain control through conventional power, through rules and status. But Wednesday navigates these interactions with a quiet dominance. She doesn't confront, she outmaneuvers. Every question she asks, every response she gives, is calibrated to extract information, test motives, and assess trustworthiness. The tension in these exchanges comes not from loud conflict, but from subtle psychological maneuvering, and it's far more engaging because it feels authentic rather than performative. The Academy itself amplifies these dynamics. Nevermore is portrayed as a character in its own right, ancient, imposing, unpredictable. Its Gothic architecture, shadowed corridors, and hidden corners create a constant sense of unease, and the environment interacts with the narrative in subtle ways. Characters' movements and reactions are shaped by the spaces they occupy, and the audience is made acutely aware of how the architecture contributes to both tension and storytelling. The interplay between Wednesday and her peers is equally intricate. Students are positioned not merely as friends or antagonists, but as variables in a complex social system. Some seek her approval, some attempt to manipulate her, and some are unknowingly caught in the orbit of her perception. These interactions are layered with nuance. Every word, every pause, every subtle gesture carries potential meaning. And Wednesday, ever the observer, is constantly reading, interpreting, and anticipating. Subtle moments of humor punctuate the narrative, but they are never overt or distracting. A dry remark, an ironic twist of language, a fleeting expression, all serve to humanize Wednesday without diminishing her analytical intensity. These moments also provide the audience with relief, a counterbalance to the psychological and Gothic tension that dominates the story. Humor is used sparingly but effectively, emphasizing character over spectacle. As the narrative progresses, small incidents begin to converge, revealing interconnectedness that was initially hidden. The story rewards attention to detail. Clues planted in early scenes re-emerge, relationships shift, and minor events take on new significance. The unfolding mystery is intricate, layered, and carefully paced, creating a sense of narrative inevitability without feeling predictable. Wednesday's problem-solving approach remains the linchpin of the story. She methodically tests hypotheses, considers outcomes, and calculates risk. Unlike typical protagonists driven by impulse or emotion, her decisions are deliberate and strategic. This creates a fascinating narrative tension. The audience is aware of both her capabilities and the unpredictable consequences of a complex environment, leading to a heightened sense of engagement and anticipation. Simultaneously, subtle supernatural elements weave through the story. These are not flashy or excessive, but they serve to heighten intrigue and deepen the Gothic tone. Shadows move differently, hallways shift, and glimpses of inexplicable phenomena are presented with restraint. The supernatural is integrated seamlessly into the environment and narrative, enhancing suspense without overshadowing character-driven storytelling. Interpersonal tension continues to build. Wednesday's calm contrasts sharply with the reactions of others, emphasizing her unique perspective. Characters who initially seemed self-assured begin revealing vulnerabilities, insecurities, and hidden motives when confronted with her unflinching analysis. These dynamics add layers of complexity, creating a narrative that is as much about understanding human behavior as it is about unraveling a central mystery. By mid-story, the stakes are unmistakable. Incidents escalate from minor curiosities to events with tangible consequences, involving both physical danger and psychological impact. Wednesday's responses remain measured and precise, highlighting her ability to maintain composure under pressure, while continuing to manipulate and analyze her surroundings. The narrative continues to balance psychological tension with thematic depth. Questions about identity, morality, and personal responsibility are threaded throughout the story, often emerging naturally from character interactions and plot developments. Wednesday's exploration of her environment becomes an exploration of herself, as well as a reflection on the broader systems and hierarchies she navigates. Every revelation, every twist is earned. The story avoids gratuitous surprises. Instead, it cultivates suspense through consistent attention to detail, character insight, and the careful layering of information. The audience is encouraged to piece together patterns alongside Wednesday, creating a deeply immersive experience. As the tension steadily mounts, it becomes clear that the narrative is building toward a significant convergence. All elements, relationships, environmental cues, supernatural hints, and Wednesday's strategic actions are aligning toward a pivotal moment of confrontation and resolution. The storytelling maintains a delicate balance. Suspense escalates, but pacing remains controlled, allowing the audience to fully absorb each development. As the narrative continues to unfold, you begin to notice how carefully the story orchestrates tension and discovery. Wednesday moves through Nevermore Academy with an awareness that borders on uncanny. She anticipates not just the immediate consequences of actions, but the ripple effects, how each choice, each observation, might alter the behavior of everyone around her. And that makes every interaction feel loaded, every exchange fraught with unspoken significance. It's in these moments that the series truly distinguishes itself. The drama isn't always external. Much of it exists in the mental chess game between Wednesday and her peers, faculty, and even the environment itself. Small gestures, a shift in posture, a fleeting glance, a carefully chosen word, carry the weight of much larger stakes. For the audience, this creates a slow-building, almost hypnotic tension, where attention to nuance becomes essential to understanding the evolving dynamics. The supernatural elements, subtle as they are, deepen the sense of unpredictability. Hallways seem to stretch unnaturally, shadows flicker with intent, and brief, disorienting phenomena suggest a world governed by rules beyond the ordinary. These moments are never overplayed. Instead, they reinforce the psychological landscape, making Nevermore feel alive, reactive, and, at times, threatening. Wednesday's ability to interpret and manipulate these cues further underscores her unique skill set, positioning her as both participant and analyst in the story's unfolding mystery. Interactions with faculty continue to reveal layers of complexity. Authority figures attempt to assert control through intimidation, misinformation, or selective revelation. Wednesday, ever the strategist, navigates these interactions with calm precision. She asks questions not for answers alone, but to gauge reactions, test credibility, and uncover underlying motives. These sequences are as much about psychological mastery as plot progression, highlighting her intelligence and strategic acumen. Peer relationships are equally nuanced. Characters with conflicting motivations, hidden agendas, or unpredictable temperaments create an intricate social web. Wednesday engages with these dynamics thoughtfully, often using subtle manipulation or observation rather than overt confrontation. This approach generates tension and intrigue, as alliances shift and true intentions are gradually revealed. The audience is left constantly reassessing relationships alongside her, deepening engagement and investment in the story. Small details continue to carry outsized narrative significance. The placement of objects, the timing of dialogue, and environmental cues all contribute to layered storytelling. A seemingly innocuous remark can reveal hidden motivations. A minor shift in the setting can foreshadow later developments. By foregrounding observation and inference, the story rewards careful viewing and reflects Wednesday's meticulous approach to understanding her world. Humor and irony remain carefully integrated, providing moments of levity without undermining tension. Wednesday's dry wit, often delivered through understatement or subtle facial expressions, humanizes her and offers brief respite from the story's intensity. These touches prevent the narrative from becoming overly clinical or detached, reinforcing her relatability even as her analytical prowess dominates the story. The mystery itself grows increasingly intricate. Initially disconnected events begin to interlock, revealing patterns and causal relationships. Clues planted early in the narrative emerge with new relevance, and the implications of minor details become apparent in retrospect. This structure ensures that suspense is cumulative and layered, rather than reliant on sudden shocks or arbitrary twists. As stakes escalate, so too does Wednesday's engagement with the central conflict. Incidents that once seemed isolated evolve into systemic threats. The narrative maintains tension by balancing immediate challenges with broader implications, emphasizing both personal stakes and structural consequences. Wednesday's responses, measured and precise, continually reinforce her role as a strategic observer and actor. The story also interrogates deeper themes. Identity, morality, and the ethics of intervention are explored through her interactions and choices. Wednesday's analytical perspective highlights contrasts between instinct, logic, and emotion, prompting reflection on the ways individuals navigate complex systems and relationships. These thematic layers enrich the narrative, ensuring it resonates beyond the immediate plot and Gothic setting. By mid to late segments, the convergence of narrative threads becomes increasingly apparent. Relationships, environmental cues, and hidden mysteries align towards significant turning points. Wednesday's prior observations, deductions, and interventions gain tangible consequences, driving both character development and plot momentum. The audience experiences the payoff of accumulated tension as multiple strands intersect, creating a sense of narrative inevitability while preserving suspense. Throughout, pacing is meticulously managed. Moments of high tension alternate with reflective pauses, allowing both the audience and Wednesday to process developments. These breathing spaces enhance immersion, prevent narrative fatigue, and provide opportunities for subtle character exploration. Silence and stillness are utilized effectively, heightening awareness and anticipation. The series' visual language complements its narrative strategy. Gothic architecture, shadowed corridors, and atmospheric lighting reinforce psychological tension and thematic resonance. Camera framing often emphasizes perspective, drawing attention to what Wednesday observes and highlighting disparities between her perception and that of other characters. These visual choices deepen audience engagement and reinforce the centrality of her perspective. By the end of this portion of the story, the foundation is firmly laid for climactic developments. Wednesday's intellect, perception, and strategic acumen have established her as a narrative anchor. The world around her, both human and environmental, is fully realized, with tension, mystery, and stakes carefully calibrated to maximize impact. Audiences are left not simply wondering what happens next, but anticipating the convergence of character, mystery, and revelation. The story has methodically positioned Wednesday as both observer and catalyst, shaping the narrative in real time while navigating threats, uncovering secrets, and asserting her influence. In sum, the trailer and early narrative segments establish a protagonist whose intelligence and composure drive the story. Every interaction, environmental cue, and subtle detail is meaningful, contributing to a psychologically rich and immersive world. Suspense, humor, and thematic exploration are interwoven seamlessly, ensuring that the audience is engaged not only with plot developments, but with the intricate psychology of the central character and the Gothic living world she inhabits. By now, the story has fully established its rhythm, and you can see how Wednesday's presence reshapes the environment around her. She doesn't just react to events, she provokes them in subtle ways, testing boundaries, uncovering hidden truths, and challenging the assumptions of those around her. Every glance, every remark, every calculated gesture carries weight, and it becomes increasingly clear that the narrative's momentum revolves around her ability to perceive, interpret, and act on information that others miss. The social hierarchy at Nevermore Academy is especially fascinating in this context. Students who initially seemed self-assured and dominant gradually reveal insecurities when faced with Wednesday's analytical approach. peer interactions evolve into a complex web of influence, manipulation, and psychological tension. She doesn't merely navigate these relationships, she actively shapes them, and the audience begins to perceive the subtle shifts in power dynamics as a core component of the story. Faculty interactions, meanwhile, reinforce the tension in a different register. Authority figures attempt to maintain control through structured rules, selective information, and intimidation. But Wednesday's calm intelligence consistently subverts these efforts. Rather than confrontation, she employs observation, inference, and strategic questioning. These exchanges create a sense of suspense that is cerebral rather than visceral, drawing the audience into the intellectual stakes of the narrative. The supernatural undertones of the series continue to weave through the story with careful restraint. Hallways seem to shift, shadows appear to move with intent, and unexplainable phenomena punctuate key narrative moments. These elements heighten suspense without undermining the psychological realism of the story, and they contribute to a sense that the environment itself is an active participant in the unfolding mystery. Wednesday's ability to interpret and respond to these cues further underscores her unique position in the narrative as both observer and agent. Humor is sparingly applied, often through subtle irony or dry wit, which humanizes Wednesday without diminishing her analytical edge. These moments serve as brief respites that enhance character depth, offering glimpses into her personality beneath the stoic exterior. They also provide contrast, emphasizing the tension in the story's darker or more mysterious sequences. As the plot develops, minor incidents begin to interconnect, revealing broader patterns and relationships. Clues and observations from early episodes take on new significance, illustrating the story's layered construction. This methodical buildup ensures that suspense is cumulative, rewarding careful attention and encouraging the audience to engage actively with the narrative. Wednesday's strategic approach becomes increasingly vital as stakes escalate. Threats evolve from minor anomalies to tangible dangers, with consequences that affect both individuals and the broader environment of the Academy. Her responses, calculated, precise, and adaptive, reinforce her centrality to the story, while also highlighting the complexity of navigating a world where every action has multiple ramifications. Thematically, the story continues to explore questions of identity, morality, and personal responsibility. Wednesday's analytical perspective contrasts with the more emotionally driven responses of other characters, creating opportunities for reflection on human behavior, decision-making, and ethical complexity. These layers deepen the narrative, ensuring resonance beyond surface-level suspense or Gothic aesthetic. The narrative structure emphasizes pacing and tension management. Sequences of observation and deduction are interspersed with reflective or quiet moments, allowing the audience time to process developments and increasing immersion. Silence and stillness are employed strategically to heighten awareness, anticipation, and engagement with the psychological stakes. Visual storytelling complements the narrative with deliberate framing, lighting, and composition. Gothic architecture, shadowed corridors, and atmospheric details reinforce mood and thematic undertones. Camera work frequently centers on Wednesday's perspective, inviting the audience to adopt her viewpoint and engage with the story through her analytical lens. By the mid to late portions of the early narrative arc, the convergence of plot threads becomes increasingly apparent. Previously isolated incidents, interpersonal tensions, and environmental cues begin to align, foreshadowing climactic developments. Wednesday's prior observations and strategic actions gain tangible consequences, propelling both character development and narrative momentum. Through it all, Wednesday remains the narrative anchor. Every plot development, interaction, and revelation is filtered through her perspective, emphasizing her role as both a participant and a lens. The story rewards audience engagement by offering insights into her reasoning, decisions, and the subtle impacts she has on the world around her. By the end of this chapter, the groundwork for escalating tension, deeper character exploration, and complex narrative convergence is firmly established. The audience is positioned to anticipate further revelations, confrontations, and the intricate interplay between psychological insight, supernatural elements, and social dynamics that define the series. In conclusion, the trailer and initial narrative segments establish a rich, immersive world where Wednesday's intellect, composure, and subtle influence drive the story. Suspense, psychological depth, interpersonal complexity, and thematic resonance are carefully balanced, ensuring that viewers are deeply engaged not only with the unfolding events, but with the intricate dynamics of perception, strategy, and influence that she embodies. By this point, the narrative has firmly established its rhythm, and you can sense how every element, environment, character, mystery, is calibrated around Wednesday's perspective. Her presence transforms the Academy itself into a complex ecosystem, where subtle actions ripple outward with significant consequences. The story thrives on these microdynamics, making the audience hyper-aware of even the smallest gestures, expressions, or pauses, because anything could reveal insight into the overarching mystery. What's remarkable is the way the series handles tension. Unlike traditional thrillers that rely on spectacle, jump scares, or loud climaxes, here suspense is cultivated through observation, inference, and psychological acuity. You watch the story unfold from Wednesday's vantage point, learning to anticipate, deduce, and question alongside her. This method engages the audience intellectually, making them active participants in the unraveling of events rather than passive viewers. Peer interactions continue to be a critical source of narrative complexity. Students who initially appeared confident or self-possessed gradually expose vulnerabilities when confronted with Wednesday's analytical gaze. Social alliances shift, rivalries evolve, and latent tensions come to the surface. These dynamics feel authentic because they are driven by character motivations and behavioral cues, not contrived plot devices. Wednesday's subtle manipulation and observation of these interactions highlight her strategic intelligence and reinforce her role as a central pivot in the story. Faculty interactions provide another layer of intrigue. Authority figures attempt to assert control through intimidation, selective disclosure, or institutional power. But Wednesday navigates these exchanges with calm, deliberate precision. Rather than direct confrontation, she employs strategic questioning and observation, effectively reversing power dynamics without overt aggression. This approach generates cerebral suspense, emphasizing the intellectual stakes of the narrative and establishing her as a formidable force within the Academy's social and institutional hierarchy. Supernatural elements remain understated but impactful. Shifts in shadows, anomalous environmental cues, and fleeting glimpses of otherworldly phenomena enhance tension without overshadowing character-driven storytelling. These details contribute to a sense that Nevermore Academy is a living, reactive entity, one that responds to the actions, observations, and decisions of its inhabitants. Wednesday's ability to interpret these subtleties underscores her unique perception and further immerses the audience in her analytical mindset. Humor continues to punctuate the narrative strategically. Dry wit, ironic remarks, and subtle expressions humanize Wednesday without undermining her composure or intellect. These brief moments of levity provide balance, highlighting the contrast between her analytical precision and the unpredictability of the people and events surrounding her. The effect is to reinforce her relatability while maintaining the story's tension and Gothic atmosphere. As the plot develops, previously isolated events coalesce into a complex web of interrelated incidents. Early clues and subtle narrative threads gain new significance, rewarding careful attention and encouraging viewers to actively piece together patterns alongside Wednesday. Suspense is cumulative and layered, avoiding reliance on sudden plot twists or shock value, and instead deriving impact from the careful construction of a coherent, immersive mystery. The stakes intensify as incidents evolve from minor curiosities to tangible threats. Wednesday's measured responses, assessing risk, predicting consequences, and strategically intervening, demonstrate her mastery of the environment and social dynamics. The audience witnesses the tangible effects of her intellect and composure, deepening engagement and investment in both character and narrative. Thematically, the series continues to explore identity, morality, and ethical decision-making. Wednesday's perspective contrasts with the more emotionally driven approaches of other characters, prompting reflection on the interplay between logic, instinct, and morality. These thematic threads enrich the narrative, ensuring resonance beyond surface-level suspense and Gothic aesthetics. Pacing and narrative structure are meticulously managed. Moments of tension and observation are interspersed with reflective pauses, allowing the audience to process developments and enhancing immersion. Silence and stillness are leveraged to heighten anticipation, focus attention, and underscore the psychological stakes at play. Visual storytelling complements the narrative's cerebral approach. Gothic architecture, shadowed corridors, and atmospheric lighting create a mood that is both immersive and unsettling. Camera framing often emphasizes Wednesday's point of view, aligning the audience with her analytical perception and reinforcing her central role as observer and actor. By the latter portion of this early narrative segment, plot threads begin converging. Interpersonal dynamics, environmental cues, and emerging threats align toward climactic developments. Wednesday's prior deductions and interventions gain tangible consequences, driving both story momentum and character growth. The audience can sense the impending collision of events, but the story's layered construction ensures suspense remains potent. Through it all, Wednesday serves as the gravitational center. Every development, psychological, supernatural, or social, is filtered through her perspective. Her influence is subtle yet pervasive, shaping outcomes, guiding audience perception, and anchoring the narrative's tension and complexity. By the end of this segment, the foundation is fully established. A protagonist of extraordinary intellect, a living, reactive environment, and a narrative that rewards observation, deduction, and reflection. The audience is prepared for escalating stakes, deeper revelations, and the intricate interplay between human behavior, mystery, and the subtle supernatural elements that define the world of Nevermore Academy. In sum, the story thus far demonstrates mastery in balancing suspense, character complexity, and thematic depth. Wednesday's perspective drives the narrative, and every environmental cue, social interaction, and subtle plot point is calibrated to deepen engagement, heighten tension, and immerse viewers in a psychologically rich, meticulously constructed Gothic world. By this stage, the narrative has fully embraced its dual focus: the external mysteries of Nevermore Academy and the internal workings of Wednesday's mind. It's remarkable how the story weaves these together, making her thought process central to the audience's experience. You're no longer just following events. You're inhabiting her analytical perspective, noticing the nuances she notices, anticipating the connections she anticipates, and feeling the tension she calculates. The subtle evolution of social dynamics continues to captivate. Students and faculty alike respond differently, depending on how Wednesday engages with them. What might seem like casual interactions are often layered with unspoken tests of loyalty, perception, and cunning. Characters who appear confident at first gradually reveal their vulnerabilities when confronted with her analytical gaze, shifting power balances in ways that feel organic rather than contrived. Faculty interactions remain a compelling source of tension. Figures of authority, relying on traditional control mechanisms, find themselves subtly outmaneuvered. Wednesday's approach, strategic questioning, careful observation, and measured responses, creates a constant undercurrent of suspense. The audience recognizes that she is rarely reactive. She is always a step ahead, planning for contingencies, and evaluating potential outcomes in real time. Supernatural elements continue to punctuate the story without overwhelming it. Hallways that stretch unnaturally, shadows that behave unpredictably, and fleeting glimpses of phenomena that defy explanation all contribute to the Gothic ambiance. These elements reinforce the narrative's tension and highlight the unpredictability of the environment, while Wednesday's capacity to interpret and respond to these cues underscores her exceptional perception and adaptability. The story also balances tension with moments of subtle humor. Dry remarks, ironic observations, and fleeting expressions humanize Wednesday, providing brief respites from the story's intensity. These instances enrich her character, emphasizing that even a calculated, highly analytical mind contains wit and personality, making her more relatable without diminishing her intellectual dominance. Plot threads are increasingly interconnected. Early, seemingly minor incidents now reveal significance as patterns emerge. The narrative rewards attention to detail, with previously overlooked clues gaining relevance, reinforcing the story's layered construction. Suspense is cumulative and intellectually engaging, emphasizing deduction and observation rather than reliance on arbitrary twists or excessive spectacle. The stakes escalate as challenges shift from abstract or minor threats to tangible consequences. Wednesday's responses remain precise and calculated. The story consistently shows how her strategic actions shape outcomes, emphasizing her agency and reinforcing her role as the story's central force. Audience engagement deepens as consequences of her intellect and decisions manifest across interpersonal, environmental, and narrative dimensions. Thematically, the story delves into questions of identity, morality, and the ethics of intervention. Wednesday's analytical approach contrasts with the emotionally driven decisions of other characters, prompting the audience to reflect on the balance between logic, instinct, and human empathy. These thematic undercurrents enrich the narrative, adding depth beyond the immediate plot and Gothic setting. Pacing remains meticulous. Periods of observation and deduction alternate with reflective moments, allowing the audience to process and internalize developments. Silence and stillness are used to heighten tension, drawing attention to micro-expressions, environmental details, and the subtle dynamics of character interaction. Visual storytelling reinforces these narrative strategies. Gothic architecture, shadowed corridors, and atmospheric lighting cultivate mood, enhance thematic resonance, and focus attention on Wednesday's perception. Camera work often centers on her point of view, creating a sense of alignment between audience and protagonist, and emphasizing the story's psychological depth. As the story approaches the later stages of this segment, converging narrative threads become more apparent. Interpersonal dynamics, environmental cues, and emerging threats all point toward imminent climactic developments. Wednesday's previous observations, deductions, and interventions now have tangible consequences, setting the stage for narrative escalation and resolution. Wednesday remains the gravitational anchor. Her intellect, strategic thinking, and nuanced perception influence every development, social, environmental, or supernatural. The audience experiences the narrative through her lens, deepening engagement and reinforcing her centrality in shaping the story's unfolding events. By the end of this segment, the foundations for suspense, character development, and narrative convergence are firmly laid. The audience is prepared to follow Wednesday into increasingly complex scenarios, where psychological insight, strategic foresight, and the interplay of human and supernatural forces will determine outcomes. The story thus far demonstrates an impressive balance of suspense, character depth, thematic exploration, and environmental immersion. Wednesday's perspective drives engagement, with every detail, interaction, visual cue, or narrative hint calibrated to deepen tension and maintain audience investment. The Gothic, intelligent, and intricately structured world of Nevermore Academy is now fully realized, setting the stage for the next phase of escalating drama and revelation. By this point, the narrative has reached a level of complexity where Wednesday's influence over her environment and the people around her is unmistakable. She is not merely a participant in the story, she actively shapes it. Every choice, observation, and deduction has consequences, and the audience is acutely aware of how her analytical mind drives the unfolding events. The tension arises as much from her intellectual maneuvers as from the external threats that Nevermore Academy presents. Peer dynamics continue to evolve in fascinating ways. Students who seemed confident and unflappable initially begin to reveal hidden insecurities or conflicting motivations. Alliances shift unpredictably, and subtle power plays emerge that the audience may not notice at first glance. Wednesday thrives in this social chess game, often using minimal interaction to provoke maximum insight. The quiet, calculated manipulation of relationships becomes a hallmark of her character, making every social exchange meaningful and tension-laden. Faculty interactions remain similarly intricate. Authority figures attempt to assert control using institutional power, selective information, or intimidation. Wednesday, however, approaches these exchanges with measured observation and strategic questioning. Rather than responding impulsively or emotionally, she assesses motives, anticipates reactions, and subtly shifts power dynamics in her favor. These interactions create a steady undercurrent of suspense, highlighting the intellectual stakes of the narrative. The story's supernatural undertones continue to enhance tension without overwhelming the narrative. Hallways and rooms appear to shift subtly, shadows move in ways that seem intentional, and fleeting glimpses of otherworldly phenomena punctuate critical moments. These elements reinforce the Gothic tone, underscore the unpredictability of the environment, and allow Wednesday's perceptiveness to shine as she interprets and reacts to these anomalies. Humor remains carefully integrated, often emerging from dry wit, irony, or fleeting expressions that punctuate the tension. These moments humanize Wednesday, providing glimpses of personality beneath her analytical exterior. They serve as brief but effective relief, balancing the psychological intensity while keeping her relatable and grounded. As the plot develops, earlier incidents begin to interconnect, revealing patterns and relationships that were initially obscured. Clues and narrative threads planted earlier gain new significance, rewarding careful attention and reinforcing the story's layered construction. Suspense is cumulative, driven by deduction and observation, rather than arbitrary plot twists. And the audience is encouraged to engage intellectually alongside Wednesday. The stakes escalate steadily. Events that were initially minor curiosities transform into tangible threats, with consequences that ripple across social, environmental, and supernatural dimensions. Wednesday's measured responses emphasize her agency and intellect, showcasing her as both protagonist and catalyst. The audience witnesses the impact of her decisions, further deepening engagement and investment in the unfolding narrative. Thematically, the story explores questions of identity, morality, and personal responsibility. Wednesday's analytical perspective contrasts with more emotionally driven decisions of other characters, prompting reflection on the interplay between logic, instinct, and morality. These thematic threads provide depth and resonance beyond surface-level suspense, enriching the story's overall impact. Pacing continues to be a key strength. Periods of observation and deduction alternate with reflective or quieter sequences, allowing the audience to process developments and enhancing immersion. Strategic use of silence and stillness heightens tension, focusing attention on subtle gestures, environmental cues, and the psychological dynamics at play. Visual storytelling reinforces the narrative. Gothic architecture, shadowed corridors, and atmospheric lighting establish mood, reinforce thematic undertones, and highlight Wednesday's perspective. Camera work frequently aligns with her point of view, drawing the audience into her analytical framework and emphasizing the story's psychological depth. As the segment progresses, narrative threads converge toward pivotal developments. Interpersonal tensions, environmental cues, and emerging threats align in ways that increase suspense and foreshadow climactic moments. Wednesday's prior deductions and strategic actions gain visible consequences, driving both plot momentum and character evolution. Throughout, Wednesday remains the narrative anchor. Her perception, intellect, and strategic foresight influence every aspect of the story: social dynamics, environmental interaction, and supernatural phenomena. The audience experiences events through her lens, deepening engagement and reinforcing her centrality. By the conclusion of this chapter, the foundations for escalating suspense, complex character development, and converging narrative arcs are fully established. Viewers are prepared for heightened stakes, intricate revelations, and the interplay of intellect, human behavior, and supernatural elements that will define the next stage of the story. The series thus far demonstrates a careful balance of psychological tension, character complexity, thematic exploration, and immersive atmosphere. Wednesday's perspective drives engagement, with each interaction, observation, and subtle cue contributing to the depth and richness of the narrative. Nevermore Academy emerges as a living, responsive world, and Wednesday's intellect and composure anchor the story, setting the stage for the increasingly intense developments to follow. By this stage, the story has fully immersed the audience in Wednesday's unique worldview, and the depth of her perception becomes increasingly apparent. Every interaction she engages in, every environment she navigates, and every subtle anomaly she observes contributes to a sense that the story is as much about cognition and insight as it is about plot progression. Her perspective is central, and the audience begins to internalize her analytical process, noticing patterns, predicting outcomes, and understanding motives before the characters themselves do. Social dynamics continue to evolve with complexity. Students respond differently depending on Wednesday's approach, and the ripple effects of her observations subtly reshape the hierarchy of interactions. Minor provocations or understated comments have outsized consequences, revealing hidden insecurities, shifting alliances, and exposing latent rivalries. The story excels in showing these transformations organically, ensuring that each development feels authentic rather than forced. Wednesday's influence on the social ecosystem of Nevermore Academy is constant, even when invisible to the casual observer, which reinforces her role as the central pivot of narrative tension. Faculty members provide a parallel source of tension. Authority figures wield formal power and attempt to control the narrative through rules, intimidation, or selective disclosure. Yet Wednesday consistently maintains the upper hand through strategic observation and questioning. She rarely reacts impulsively. Instead, she evaluates, anticipates, and acts with precision. This intellectual chess game creates a layered suspense, emphasizing psychological acuity and strategic foresight over overt action or melodrama. The supernatural elements remain carefully integrated, adding unpredictability without overwhelming the character-driven narrative. Shifting shadows, inexplicable environmental changes, and fleeting supernatural glimpses reinforce the Gothic atmosphere and highlight the Academy's complexity. Wednesday's interactions with these phenomena demonstrate her adaptability and insight, showing how her analytical mind interprets and leverages the unknown to her advantage. Humor and subtle irony continue to punctuate the narrative at strategic points. Dry quips, understated expressions, and ironic observations humanize Wednesday, offering glimpses into her personality beyond the stoic, calculating exterior. These brief moments of levity provide narrative balance, giving the audience respite while deepening character relatability. The story's construction reveals increasing interconnectedness. Incidents that once appeared isolated gain significance as patterns emerge. Clues and early narrative threads reappear with new relevance, rewarding attentive observation and reinforcing the narrative's layered design. Suspense accumulates organically, encouraging the audience to engage intellectually alongside Wednesday, rather than relying on arbitrary plot twists or contrived surprises. Escalating stakes intensify the narrative. Events that initially seemed minor now produce tangible consequences, affecting characters, environments, and the Academy's broader dynamics. Wednesday's measured, precise interventions underscore her agency and highlight the story's emphasis on intellect and strategy over brute force. Viewers witness the consequences of her reasoning and tactical decisions, which enhances immersion and investment. Thematically, questions of identity, morality, and ethical responsibility remain central. Wednesday's analytical perspective contrasts sharply with the more emotionally reactive approaches of other characters, prompting reflection on the balance between logic, instinct, and human empathy. These thematic undercurrents enrich the narrative, elevating it beyond Gothic suspense to a story that invites contemplation about human behavior and decision-making under complex circumstances. Pacing continues to be meticulously managed. Periods of quiet observation or reflection alternate with moments of heightened tension, allowing the audience to absorb the narrative's intricacies. Strategic use of silence and stillness amplifies focus, emphasizing micro-expressions, environmental cues, and subtle social interactions, which heighten suspense without resorting to overt spectacle. Visual storytelling complements the cerebral structure of the narrative. Gothic architecture, shadowed corridors, and carefully orchestrated lighting reinforce tone, mood, and thematic resonance. Camera work frequently aligns with Wednesday's perspective, drawing the audience into her analytical framework and enhancing immersion in the psychological and supernatural dimensions of Nevermore Academy. As the story moves toward the latter part of this segment, narrative threads converge with increasing clarity. Interpersonal dynamics, environmental cues, and emergent threats coalesce, signaling approaching climactic developments. Wednesday's prior deductions and strategic interventions begin to manifest in tangible consequences, both for her and for those around her, reinforcing her central role as orchestrator of the unfolding events. Throughout this portion of the story, Wednesday remains the gravitational anchor. Her intellect, observational acuity, and strategic foresight influence every plot development, social, environmental, or supernatural. Audience engagement is deepened by seeing the world through her lens, experiencing both the immediate stakes and the long-term consequences of her decisions. By the conclusion of this chapter, the foundation for narrative escalation, intricate character interplay, and converging plot lines is firmly established. Viewers are positioned to follow Wednesday as she navigates increasingly complex scenarios where intellect, perception, and strategic decision-making will determine the outcomes of high-stakes conflicts, social manipulations, and unfolding mysteries. The narrative thus far demonstrates masterful integration of psychological tension, character complexity, thematic depth, and atmospheric storytelling. Wednesday's perspective drives engagement, with each interaction, observation, and subtle cue contributing to the depth, tension, and richness of the narrative. Nevermore Academy emerges as a living, responsive, and enigmatic world, anchored by a protagonist whose intellect and composure make her presence the central axis around which the story revolves. By now, the story has reached a point where every element, the environment, the characters, and the emerging mysteries, is tightly interwoven around Wednesday's perspective. She operates not merely as a participant, but as the axis upon which the narrative pivots. Each observation, each interaction, and each subtle deduction contributes to the audience's understanding, drawing them deeper into her analytical mindset. There's a rhythm to her engagement with the world, a methodical precision that transforms even the most mundane occurrences into potential insights. The evolution of peer dynamics continues to be particularly compelling. Students who initially seem confident and socially secure begin to reveal cracks under the pressure of Wednesday's perceptive gaze. Alliances shift, rivalries intensify, and subtle manipulations begin to play out in ways that are both unpredictable and satisfying. These interactions are carefully layered, showing consequences that ripple across the social fabric of the Academy without feeling contrived. Wednesday's ability to influence these dynamics with minimal intervention underscores her strategic intelligence and situates her as the primary agent of change in this social ecosystem. Faculty interactions, too, highlight her strategic prowess. Authority figures attempt to assert dominance using institutional power, selective information, and controlled influence. But Wednesday approaches each exchange with meticulous calculation. She evaluates motives, anticipates reactions, and subtly shifts the balance of power, creating a tension that is both intellectual and suspenseful. The story emphasizes her role not as a reactive protagonist, but as a proactive orchestrator, with the narrative tension arising as much from her reasoning as from the external conflicts. The supernatural elements maintain a delicate balance within the story. Anomalies in lighting, shifting shadows, and fleeting glimpses of unexplained phenomena punctuate key moments, reinforcing the Gothic atmosphere while remaining consistent with the story's grounded psychological tension. Wednesday's interactions with these elements demonstrate her adaptability and her capacity to perceive patterns and meaning in a world that is at once familiar and unsettling. These elements enhance suspense and immersion without overshadowing the narrative's focus on character and intellect. Humor continues to punctuate the narrative sparingly but effectively. Dry, ironic observations and subtle expressions humanize Wednesday and provide brief relief from the psychological intensity, highlighting her personality without undermining her analytical rigor. These moments of levity enhance engagement, making her a multidimensional character whose intelligence is balanced by wit and perceptiveness. The story's narrative construction reveals an increasing complexity as early incidents begin to intersect. Seemingly isolated events gain new significance, patterns emerge, and clues planted in prior sequences become critical. The narrative rewards close attention, encouraging the audience to participate in the deductive process alongside Wednesday. Suspense is cumulative, emerging from observation and reasoning rather than arbitrary plot twists, and this layering ensures a rich, immersive storytelling experience. Stakes escalate naturally, with events that initially seemed minor evolving into tangible threats with broader consequences. Wednesday's responses remain measured, deliberate, and strategic, reinforcing her agency and the impact of her intellect. The audience sees the direct correlation between her deductions and the narrative outcomes, deepening engagement and investment in her perspective. Thematic exploration continues to add depth. Questions of identity, morality, and ethical decision-making are embedded throughout her interactions and observations. Wednesday's analytical approach highlights contrasts between logic and emotion, prompting reflection on the balance of intellect, instinct, and human empathy. These themes enrich the story, providing resonance beyond the immediate plot and Gothic environment. Pacing remains meticulously calibrated. Periods of observation and reflection are interspersed with rising tension and consequential developments, allowing the audience to process complex narrative layers. Strategic use of silence and stillness amplifies focus on micro-expressions, environmental details, and social dynamics, reinforcing suspense and immersion without resorting to spectacle. Visual storytelling continues to complement the narrative's cerebral approach. The Gothic architecture, shadowed corridors, and carefully orchestrated lighting create a consistent mood and reinforce thematic resonance. Camera work often aligns with Wednesday's point of view, drawing the audience into her analytical mindset and enhancing their understanding of both character and environment. As the story advances toward the latter portion of this segment, narrative threads increasingly converge. Interpersonal tensions, environmental cues, and emerging mysteries align toward climactic developments. Wednesday's prior deductions and interventions manifest with visible consequences, propelling both character development and plot progression. Wednesday remains the central anchor throughout. Her intellect, perception, and strategic foresight influence every development, social, environmental, or supernatural. The audience experiences the story through her lens, deepening engagement and reinforcing the centrality of her perspective in shaping outcomes and narrative direction. By the conclusion of this chapter, the foundation for escalating tension, intricate character interplay, and converging plot lines is firmly established. The audience is poised to follow Wednesday as the stakes intensify, the mysteries deepen, and the interplay of intellect, perception, and subtle manipulation reaches increasingly consequential heights. The story thus far demonstrates masterful integration of psychological suspense, character depth, thematic complexity, and immersive atmosphere. Wednesday's perspective drives engagement, with every interaction, observation, and environmental cue contributing to the layered richness and tension of the narrative. Nevermore Academy emerges as a living, responsive, and enigmatic world, anchored by a protagonist whose intellect and composure make her the central force shaping the unfolding events. By this point, the narrative has fully settled into its intricate rhythm, and Wednesday's influence over Nevermore Academy is unmistakable. She is no longer merely navigating her environment, she is actively shaping it. Every interaction, every subtle observation, and every calculated maneuver affects the world and the people around her. The audience is fully immersed in her perspective, following the meticulous logic that governs her decisions, and experiencing the story with a heightened awareness of nuance and consequence. The social landscape of the Academy continues to evolve in fascinating ways. Students who initially appeared self-assured begin to reveal hidden fears, insecurities, and conflicting motivations under Wednesday's analytical scrutiny. Minor provocations, understated comments, or strategic observations can cause ripple effects, shifting alliances, uncovering rivalries, or subtly manipulating social hierarchies. These developments feel organic, arising from character behavior rather than forced plot devices, highlighting Wednesday's mastery over the subtle currents of human interaction. Faculty dynamics add another layer of tension. Authority figures rely on conventional power structures, rules, intimidation, and selective disclosure, but Wednesday approaches each encounter with patience, observation, and strategic questioning. She evaluates motives, predicts responses, and subtly reshapes interactions in ways that give her leverage without direct confrontation. The suspense in these exchanges is cerebral, emphasizing strategic intellect and psychological insight rather than physical drama, and reinforcing her role as the central axis of the narrative. The supernatural undertones remain carefully interwoven. Hallways appear to shift, shadows behave unpredictably, and fleeting glimpses of the unexplainable punctuate critical moments. These elements enhance the Gothic atmosphere and reinforce the sense that Nevermore is a reactive, living environment. Wednesday's ability to interpret and respond to these phenomena underscores her perceptiveness and adaptability, creating tension that is both psychological and atmospheric. Moments of humor continue to punctuate the story, often through dry wit, irony, or subtle expressions. These glimpses of personality humanize Wednesday, providing relief from the psychological intensity without undermining her composure or intellect. The interplay of levity and tension reinforces the narrative's emotional texture, making her a multidimensional character whose intelligence is complemented by perceptiveness and humor. As the plot progresses, previously isolated incidents begin to interconnect. Early clues and narrative threads re-emerge with new significance, rewarding attentive viewers and reinforcing the story's layered construction. Suspense builds cumulatively, driven by deduction and observation rather than arbitrary twists. The audience is invited to engage actively with the unfolding mystery, experiencing the story through Wednesday's analytical lens. Escalating stakes are carefully calibrated. What began as minor curiosities transforms into tangible threats with significant consequences for characters, environment, and the Academy itself. Wednesday's responses, deliberate, measured, and strategic, underscore her agency and highlight the impact of intellect and foresight on narrative outcomes. Viewers witness the tangible effects of her decisions, deepening engagement and investment in both her character and the story's progression. Thematically, the narrative continues to explore identity, morality, and the ethics of intervention. Wednesday's analytical approach contrasts with the more emotionally reactive methods of other characters, prompting reflection on the interplay between logic, instinct, and human empathy. These thematic currents enrich the story, providing resonance beyond suspense and Gothic stylization, and inviting the audience to consider deeper questions about human behavior and ethical responsibility. Pacing remains meticulously managed. Periods of observation, deduction, and quiet reflection are interspersed with moments of heightened tension, allowing the audience to process complex narrative layers. Silence and stillness are used to accentuate psychological stakes, drawing attention to micro-expressions, environmental cues, and subtle social dynamics, increasing suspense without resorting to overt spectacle. Visual storytelling complements the narrative's cerebral structure. Gothic architecture, shadowed corridors, and carefully controlled lighting establish a mood that is immersive and consistent. Camera angles frequently reflect Wednesday's perspective, aligning the audience with her analytical viewpoint and reinforcing the psychological depth and thematic resonance of the story. As the story advances, narrative threads increasingly converge toward climactic developments. Interpersonal dynamics, environmental cues, and emerging threats align, setting the stage for pivotal moments. Wednesday's prior deductions, observations, and interventions manifest in tangible consequences, driving both plot momentum and character evolution, and heightening the sense of anticipation for subsequent revelations. Throughout this portion, Wednesday remains the gravitational center of the narrative. Her intellect, perceptiveness, and strategic foresight shape outcomes across social, environmental, and supernatural dimensions. Experiencing events through her perspective deepens audience engagement, emphasizing her centrality in the unfolding story, and reinforcing the consistency